I wouldn't change or trade my experiences in China, of losing my leg, of growing up in that orphanage, of my childhood here in the States. I wouldn't change any of that for the world, because all that I am and who I am is because of each of those things.
Welcome to the Reindl Report, a podcast out of San Diego, California that rewrites the definition of mediocrity.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
So come along for the ride as Paul Reindl takes you through the world of sports with insight, interviews, and incredibly bad jokes.
It just seems like the people that are so butthurt about it.
Did you just throw a butthurt out there?
Yeah, I said butthurt.
2005 called. They want their turn back.
Yeah, walked right into that one.
Now, here's your host, Paul Reindl.
All right. Welcome to it, episode 41 of the Reindl Report. Wow, 41. Time flies when you're having fun, right? My name is Paul Reindl. This is the Reindl Report. This is a San Diego sports podcast based out of San Diego, primarily about the San Diego sports scene. Of course, every once in a while, we'll touch up on a couple of national storylines as well. Look, I got so much that I would love to talk about, but I'm not going to talk about on this episode, on this podcast here, because I am going to be joined in just a couple of minutes by somebody who has easily the most unique story that I've ever heard. Her name is Scout Bassett, and I met her about a year ago. She is a world record holding sprinter, full ride to UCLA, has just dominated the track world. She only has one leg. She's a Paralympian, world record holder, participated in the 2016 Paralympics down in Rio, and she just, her story, what she's had to overcome in her life, and how she has been able to look adversity right in the face and just dominate it. It's life-changing. I mean, when I first heard Scout tell her story, it made me a better person just from hearing it. And so I wanted to have her on the podcast and get to share her story with you and just catch up with her, see what she's been doing. She so much going on in her life that is just so great. And it's centered around sports, for the most part, but it's about more than sports. This is about loving life and not letting anyone or anything hold you down. I could sit here for 30 minutes and talk about March Madness, although with a weekly podcast, I don't really see the point in doing that. By the time you maybe listen to it, the next round is already come and gone. So I'm not going to go there. There's a whole lot going on in Mission Valley between San Diego State and the FS investors trying to bring the MLS to San Diego. That's going to be a story at least for the next year. And who knows how long this will actually be a story. Things are getting a little contentious, and there's definitely things that we could talk about. But like I said, I want to focus this episode of the Reindl Report with Scout and her incredible journey and her story and just some of the advice that she has, not just for an athlete, not just for somebody that grew up with struggles or anything like that, but just for anybody, any and everyone. You will be able to take something away from this interview. It's about 35 minutes long, just over 35 minutes. So I promise you will want to hear every word that she has to say. So thank you for listening. Without any further ado, here's my interview from earlier with Scout Bassett. All right, I'm not going to waste any more time here. I want to get right to my next guest. Very excited to speak with her again. Look, it's rare that you meet someone just once and you feel like you've known them for years. And that's how it was when I first met Scout Bassett, who absolutely has one of the most unique stories that I've ever heard in my life. She's a U.S. sprinter. She's a spokesperson for the Challenged Athletes Foundation, an organization that I've really come to enjoy working with and getting to know a lot of the people there. And look, we all have a story. It's not about whose is better or whose is worse, but I promise you'll be a better person for having heard Scout's story. So, Scout, Paul Reindl, great to talk to you again. Thank you so much for the time.
Hey, Paul, thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. You are always welcome on this podcast. So, Scout, you are a world record-holding sprinter. You had a full ride, I believe, to UCLA. You're BFFs with Bill Walton. You're sponsored by Nike. But there's a whole lot more to your story that I left out on purpose because I know that I couldn't do it justice by telling it myself. So, I mean, if you don't mind, please, I would love for you to share a little bit about your story.
Absolutely. So my story begins in Nanjing, China, where as an infant I was involved in a fire that took my right leg. And shortly after that I was abandoned on the street and later found and accepted at the local government orphanage there in Nanjing. And I lived there for almost 7 years, the next 7 years, enduring some really difficult hardships, some painful experiences and memories of my time there. We had no connection or relation to the outside world. We received no education while we were there, never went outside once in 7 years. It was a very isolating and lonely life, and I really had no hope for a future, and any future that I did have was one right back on the street that I came from. And I just really never thought I was going to really live a full life. And fortunately for me, when I was 7, almost 8 years old, I was adopted by a couple from northern Michigan and brought here to America. And obviously that was really life-changing, and it was also heartbreaking and traumatizing at the same time to leave behind the only thing I'd ever known my whole life, and that was the people and that orphanage. And so that was really difficult. I came here weighing all of 22 pounds, didn't speak a word of English at 7 years old. And, as most people can imagine, just the transition process, the acculturation process was very difficult. And small town, I arrived in a small town, northern Michigan, of 1,600 people, predominantly Caucasian, and I'm obviously not those things, and I also have a physical disability. So that just made for a really challenging and difficult childhood of growing up here. But one of the things that really defined my childhood was sports. I originally got involved around second, third grade, because I just wanted to be a part of something outside of the classroom. And, I joined with such excitement and enthusiasm to be a part of a team. And what I realized is that I was always welcome to practice, but not always welcome to play. And I spent countless seasons and years on the sidelines, on the bench, being told that I wasn't enough and that I didn't belong. And obviously this had such a negative effect on my self-esteem and how I looked at people with disabilities, women that were different, and I just really had no idea where my future was going to be, where I was going to fit in or belong. And just an incredible miracle happened when I was 14 years old. I received a grant from the Challenge Athletes Foundation, which is based here in San Diego. And CAF just completely transformed my life. That running prosthetic really lit the fire inside of me to achieve more, to do more, to be more. And, I'd never really found that passion doing anything else except for running. And the great thing about that is that it just gave me so much confidence and, self-esteem, and changed the way that I saw myself, just being able to run and to do something that I had never done before. And so that was really life-changing to get that single piece of equipment. And, obviously, I didn't know about Paralympics at that time. This is before the age of internet, or internet was just coming into, the picture when I was in about high school, and the dial-up, but we didn't have it because it was too expensive and too slow. And so I didn't know anything about Paralympics until I was actually recruited in college at UCLA. and most people know what happened from there. But the truth is that it has been a really difficult journey. Most people look at the things that I have now in my life and the success that I have, but it was not that way growing up, and most of, the last 20 years hasn't been like that way at all. And it's been very difficult, and I've been through a lot of personal hardships and setbacks and failures in my life to, get to where I am today. But, gosh, I'm just so grateful for all the people who've invested in me and the Challenge Athletes Foundation and so many supporters who cheered me on along the way and pushed me to do things that I never thought were possible. And all the support I've gotten really means the absolute world to me.
Oh, Scout. Try not to. I'm not crying. You're crying, okay?
It's okay. We won't tell anyone, Paul.
Yeah. Gosh, every time that story just gets me. I wanted to touch on, you gave us a lot there. I'd love to just kind of touch on a couple of things. 22 pounds, you said you were when you were 7 years old, coming with your family to Michigan. And you've talked about that experience in China, and I've tried to explain to people when I tell them, oh man, we had this great guest on the Mighty 1090 yesterday. They don't understand what I'm saying when I say you literally didn't go outside. I mean, this was not any sort of normal experience that you think of when you think of a childhood. I mean, when you say cut off from the outside world, you mean literally cut off from the outside world.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us here in America to really visualize this kind of childhood or life because we don't have anything that's even remotely similar to it. Foster care is nothing like, state government-run orphanages in China. And so, we don't have anything to really compare it to here. But, just a very, very simple life in that orphanage. No television, books, music, radio, nothing. Really no technology of any form. And, our everyday life was to work and to do chores. And, to find a way to just survive and to live another day. And obviously we were super malnourished. I mean, being 7 years old and weighing 22 pounds. And it was a very dark childhood. But what I will say is that when I was growing up in that orphanage, it's not like I knew that my life was unusual, that how I grew up was different than what other kids in the world grow up like, because we didn't know other kids in other parts of the world that lived differently than we did. We were so isolated that we just thought that our way of life was normal, and the treatment that we received and the things we were asked to do was just how every child in the world grows up as. And so but I think even as a child, I knew that something wasn't right, and that, a kid can feel despair. They can feel discouragement. They can feel what, not having hope is like. And I definitely felt those things. I just didn't know how things were ever going to change. I think, one of the things that you had mentioned earlier is, I got an opportunity to go back this last September to that orphanage and see the place that I grew up in and then meet these children. And it's a very hard reality to see these kids and to have so much love and compassion and hope for these kids, but also to realize that they may not all make it out, and they may not all have the opportunities that I have. And, I saw in so many of these kids' eyes the same look and the same feeling that I had growing up of what else is there, Mm-hmm. And so, and most of these kids now in that orphanage, over 90% of them have a physical or mental disability, and it's really tough in a country that still to this day doesn't even really acknowledge that these people exist and, are not proud to claim them. And there's still so much shame and a negative stigma attached with disability in China. So these people are hidden. They're not out on the street. They're not visible. And it's just, in many ways it's very sad. But also I'm very hopeful because times are changing and things are changing. And, all it takes is just one voice and one person to really, be an advocate for something or someone, and in this case, a group. And so I really believe in that power, and also that there's value and worth in every single life, no matter what you look like or where you come from or what disability. And I think that that's something that, is one of my passions and something that, I really want to spend more time in China advocating for that we have to value all life here, and so not just the very best or the fittest. And so it's a long road for them there, but the good news is that these kids are well taken care of. They live a decent quality of life there, and I did see just a lot of positive things there that I didn't have when I was growing up. So that really lifted my spirits too about the place.
Talking with Scout Bassett. You can follow her on Twitter and Instagram at Scout Bassett. Definitely recommend giving her a follow. It's really been fun to get to follow along your journey here, Scout. I want to just keep talking about that trip that you mentioned there in that last answer. So you grew up in this orphanage 7 years, and then you went back almost 20 years later, I believe. And how did that trip kind of come together? Were you there? Were you sponsored for that trip? Were you there on a mission? Were you there to? Were you on a project, or were you just out there? You wanted to go back and visit. How did that all come together for you?
Well, the trip came about through Nike, actually. Nike is really involved with a program in China called Active Schools, where they have partnered with 200 public schools in China to get PE activity and sports in the schools, which is a new concept for them in China. And they've invested a lot of resources in making this possible. And they had asked me if I'd be interested in coming out to do a running clinic at one of the schools with, a bunch of 4th through 6th graders and sort of kicking off this new initiative and project of theirs. And, of course, I said I absolutely would love to. This was, our specific event was in Shanghai. And, anytime I get an opportunity to go back to my homeland, I'm, more than thrilled to be able to go. And so I said absolutely, and I asked them for one favor. I said, I have one request out of my trip there. I'd love to be able to go back to Nanjing, which on the high-speed bullet train is only about an hour and a half from Shanghai. And I said I'd love to be able to go back to this Nanjing orphanage and see the kids and just contribute something. Can we bring some gifts of, things that they can use to be active, like soccer balls and basketballs and jump ropes and obviously some treats and toys. And, I just want to be able to spend time with these kids and just to give them some love and some hope. And because it's not like these people have visitors, there's not regular people coming there to tell them that they're worthy and valuable and that they are loved. And so, and also the government orphanages are really difficult to get into. They've made that even more difficult since the whole wave of adoption and of international adoption, and now families can't even go to the orphanages now to see, where the child grew up and whatnot. And so they've made it really difficult, and you usually have to know somebody, or you have to get an in, or through the government or something to even be able to get inside these orphanages. And luckily, obviously Nike, being Nike, was able to make some calls and made it happen. And it was such a powerful experience for me. I got to see the original paperwork of the documents of, my time there and my physical health and the day that I arrived and all of that. And that was really cool that they had, 20 years later, they had saved all of that. And, I think it's difficult to go back to a place that broke you, that really broke you to your core and may put you through some really difficult times in your life and, brought a lot of pain. And I think many of us are not willing to face those places or those people or whatever the situation might be and to really confront those things about ourselves. And for me, I had been back to China in 2011, but at that time, I just, the opportunity wasn't there. And I don't think I was quite ready to really address that. And I was a little bit nervous in this trip of whether or not I would be ready and to be able to do that. And it's just so incredible how good God is because, here I was so nervous, like, a flood of memories of a really difficult time of, almost living 8 years there. And, I just didn't want to have any resentment or ill will towards the people or the place. And even though it was a very difficult time when I lived there, and to be able to come back and feel nothing but love and gratitude and appreciation for that place, because all that I am started there, and so much of who I am has come from that experience. The courage, the perseverance, the strength that I have today was formed in those almost 8 years of having to fight and to survive. And so I'm so appreciative and grateful for that. But more importantly, I wanted these kids to know that they're worthy, that they are loved, that there is hope for them. And I think that's the most important thing that we can all share and we can all give, and it costs absolutely nothing to do so. And that's really what I wanted to spend my time there doing, is just loving on these kids, because I know that they don't get visitors and they don't get people that come and tell them and show them, that they're valuable and that they are loved. And so that was just such a powerful experience, and just reminding me that God can use all things for our good, even the most difficult, horrible situations and experiences in our lives He can use for good. And I just walked away with such a different perspective of being, being Chinese and having been born there, and to really be able to leave and say I'm proud of who I am and where I come from, and I'm unashamed of my story, and so that was something that I think I really needed, and it was just a very healing experience in that way, and just gave me even more passion to say I want to come back and I want to give more, I want to do more for these kids, I want them to be able to get outside and have an opportunity to be active, to be mobile. And, right now they just lack the resources and the ability to do that. But I'm very hopeful that in the future we're going to be able to do some amazing things there for these children and really change a whole culture and mindset of how that country views disability and children with disability. So, just a lot of amazing, beautiful things came from that experience. But I just really want to encourage people that if there's anything in your life that you're struggling with, anything of your past, you have to confront those things. And I think people will be surprised by maybe how healing that experience can be, and what the positive can actually be, in that it doesn't all have to be negative or bad, thoughts or memories. And so, but I do understand it is very challenging to do so, and it took me a long time to get there. But, boy, I'm so grateful and appreciative that I did that, and obviously that Nike made that experience possible.
Sure. Yeah, no, Scott, that is a very powerful story, and the reason I wanted to start with your background and your story and your trip to China was because that seems to me, at least from an outside's perspective, that seems to really be what defines you, not the fact that you're a sprinter, not the fact that you're a Paralympian or anything like that, but just this story. This is who you are. This molded you to where you're at today, brought you to where you're at today, and that's your identifier, right?
Absolutely. And, I think that so much of who we are in this day and age, we attach who we are and our worth with things, how successful, our image, our career. And, we allow the world to tell us who we are. And what I've learned from that is that if you allow that to happen, you'll never be truly confident or secure in who you are. And so for me, it's important to really embrace everything that's happened in my life and even the really difficult things, because I can see how they have shaped me for, to become a person that I could have never imagined I would be and to do things I would never have dreamed about. And most importantly, my whole life experiences have really given me such a passion to serve and to help others. And, I think just growing up, I'm not sure that I would have thought that that's what I would become or do with my life, is to really, want to help children with disabilities or all, people of all ages with disabilities, to really be advocates for young women. And so those things are just something that's super important to me, and it's far more important than winning a medal at the Paralympic Games or setting a world record or, even being sponsored by a major apparel brand. Like, those things are all incredible, and they've allowed me to live my dream and to have this platform. But our lives are nothing if we're not serving other people and giving towards our community and our world. And for me, that's really where my true passion is. And I think it's so deep because of all the experiences that I've had in my life. And, of all the really, difficult, the traumatic, the heartbreaking, the painful experiences, have really allowed me to connect with other people who've gone through similar experiences or, in their own way. And so that's been something that's been just such a blessing in my life to be able to do that.
Talking with Scout Bassett, U.S. Paralympic sprinter, spokesperson for the Challenged Athletes Foundation. Scout, just a couple more things before I let you go that I want to get to. I want to talk about the Challenged Athletes Foundation. I know that is near and dear to your heart. You already mentioned none of this would be possible without them. I'd love to talk to you about that in just a little bit. But now that we've gotten to know you and we've heard your story, I want to get back to Scout, the track superstar. When did you know that you wanted to do track and field? Like, when was that a possibility for you? You mentioned how you grew up in Michigan playing sports, whether that was practicing or playing, but you wanted to be involved. You wanted to be a part of a team, and I can only imagine how difficult that was for you at that time, especially prior to meeting the Challenged Athletes Foundation. But when did track and field, that's really been your bread and butter here athletically, when did that become a possibility for you?
Well, I started running when I was 14 years old, but I think something that people don't realize with amputee running or running with a prosthetic is it's not like putting on a pair of tennis shoes where you put it on and you're out the door and you're running. It takes a really long time to, learn the craft of being able to run with the prosthetic and for your body to adjust and, to even endure the physical pain of that kind of pounding, on the bottom of the residual limb. And so I wasn't really a good runner or a great runner until, later on in high school and early in college. I started really getting serious about endurance sports and endurance events and running, and had done several half marathons. And, that's just kind of what I set out to do. I didn't have any ambitions to, compete at any other level. And U.S. Paralympics called me when I was a sophomore in college at UCLA. The high performance director had contacted me and, had asked if I'd be interested in doing track and field. And I kind of laughed because growing up in Michigan, northern Michigan, we didn't even have track and field or cross country. So I didn't even really know entirely what that was. But they had heard that, I was a good runner and obviously looking to recruit more women. And so, I jumped at the opportunity and, I was just hooked. I knew that I had always loved to run and to be able to, as soon as I heard about the Paralympics, I could have an opportunity to compete at the highest level of our sport. As an athlete, I was like, yes, I want to do that. And certainly that wouldn't have been possible without the Challenge Athletes Foundation helping me to get my start with that running prosthetic. And CAF has been such a pioneer in the Paralympic movement, too, and supporting so many Paralympic athletes. And they've been there with me from the start. And they were there with me when I tried out for my very first Paralympic trials in 2012 and failed to make that team. And I was devastated and heartbroken. I didn't really think that, I had a future in Paralympics. Not only did I not make the team, but I came in dead last in all my events. And that was a really tough pill to swallow. I was just, I didn't know where to go, and from there, or what to do. And to be able to have CAF that supported me and said, you got to get back up and you got to keep fighting and commit another 4 years. And they've been, there with me through all of that and made my very first Paralympic team last year. And, to fulfill that dream was just the most incredible feeling in the world. And, I finished a disappointing 5th place. But I'm even more motivated and hungry now to, train these next, 3.5 years for Tokyo. And, I've seen the progress of what hard work can do and commitment, and to go from dead last in your country 4 years later to 5th in the world has just given me such encouragement and motivation of, well, what can I do in another 4 years? And so that's what I'm working towards now. But CAF is just so incredible in helping people of all disabilities with every sort of adaptive sports equipment, funding, programs, coaching, to be able to be involved in sport. And not just Paralympic athletes. We're talking about your weekend warriors. We're talking about your mom and your dads who want to keep up with their children and, they need a running prosthetic or a hand cycle. And CAF supports those kind of champions, too. And I think it's important to acknowledge that the work that CAF does is not just for Paralympic athletes, but it's for people of all abilities that want to be athletes, because we realize how important sport is for people's mental, emotional, physical health, and that it really does build confidence and self-esteem. And when people have those things, they can be, contributors to their communities. And so I'm so passionate about the work that we do. I'm going on my 9th year as a spokesperson. And I have to say that of all the things that I do in my life, or in and with my life, being a spokesperson for CAF is by far the most important. And just the impact that we have in the lives that we can touch, and the very real, visible way you can see how a single piece of equipment or a grant can really change someone's life is just, it's inspiring for me, and it's what motivates me to keep going and to get out there and train. So I'm so excited about that, and we are going to be giving out our 2017 grants very, very soon, April 1st. And so that will be exciting for what's going to be a lot of lives.
From an orphanage in Nanjing, China, to a small town in northern Michigan, to just outside of Beverly Hills, to competing in Rio de Janeiro at the 2016 Paralympics. That is a journey, Scout. That is one hell of a journey, absolutely. One thing about the CAF, and this will be my last thing here. I was just talking to Bob Bassett actually earlier. He's been on this podcast before. He helped found the Challenged Athletes Foundation, and every time I talk to him, the one thing that keeps coming to mind, I've gotten the opportunity to meet and talk to multiple athletes over the last couple of years now, and it is just always the highlight of, I don't know, my month, my year, until the next time I get to talk to somebody and hear their story. And every story is so unique and so different, but there's always one thing in common. And every athlete, they all say something along the lines of, I wouldn't change anything when they're talking about their situation. And I've heard you say something similar to that as well. I was just wondering, can you comment on how you and all these challenged athletes can just so easily focus on the positives of a situation where so many others would look at it as a negative?
Oh, I have said that many times, and I believe that about every part of my journey and my story. I wouldn't change or trade my experiences in China, of losing my leg, of growing up in that orphanage, of my childhood here in the States. I wouldn't change any of that for the world, because all that I am and who I am is because of each of those things. And, it's hard for me to picture what my life would have been like had things been very different, or if I didn't have a disability, or if I hadn't grown up in an orphanage. I can't tell you what that would have been like, because I don't know. But I truly believe that all those experiences, even the most difficult ones, has helped me to live a much richer life than if I had not had those. And I know that so many athletes say that, and so many of our challenge athletes say that, and I really believe that. I think I live such a rich life because of the things that I've been through. And, to be able to impact people, to empower them, to change their lives is such a gift. And it's a responsibility that I take very seriously. And, for me, I think that, you can always look at things in, various ways. And it's easy. And I think people would be surprised by all the really difficult dark places I've been in my life and the hard times I've gone through. And yes, I have been at those lowest of lows and the pits, and where I didn't know if I was going to come out of it. But you just have to make a choice, and you have to decide what it is that you want for yourself, what it is that you want for your life, and what are you willing to give or to give up for that. And to stop at nothing until you reach that. And I think so many people, that's where it stops. It's easy to dream about something. It's easy to hope, to pray, to wish for something, but all of that in the world isn't going to get you the things that you want. And you have to really commit to that. You have to commit to a process, not just a goal, because, you really don't have a lot of control over the outcome of things, but you have control over the process and, refining that process to getting to wherever you want to be. And for me, it's never been the goal to necessarily win a medal. Yes, that's obviously what everybody wants to do. But, I can't control my competitors. I can't control the weather that's going to be on that day. I can't even control how I'm going to be feeling. But I can control the process, refining the process, committing to the process of the training of what I want the result to be of these next 3.5 years, and it will take care of itself. The outcome will take care of itself. And so, I just really want to encourage people that if you are in a dark place in your life, maybe you've lost your hope, maybe you have gone through a tough season, a difficult year. There's some people that had a really hard life. And what I want to say is that don't give up. Keep going. Find something to live for, to keep pushing, and to hold on to that hope, because without hope, we have nothing. We are nothing. And, just to keep pressing forward and to not stay at those really lowest of lows. And I think that's one thing a lot of people struggle is they get to those really dark places, those difficult times in their life, or, maybe they're going through a really painful thing, and it's easy to get stuck there. It's easy to be parked at your place of pain, of maybe depression, of whatever you're struggling with. And we just have, it's a lot easier to stay there and to just not move from there. But you don't have to be parked there. You don't have to be, broken forever. And you just got to keep working towards becoming better every single day, little by little. And for me, I've had to do that countless times in my life, of having to sort of, go back to the drawing board and figure out what next and how to get there, and, to be able to come back from disappointment and heartbreak and things like that. So, that's really my encouragement, is don't be parked at those places. Wherever you are, whatever you're struggling with, do not stay there. Keep moving no matter what.
Scout, last thing then, before I let you go, want to have a little bit of fun here, because I know all my listeners right now, they're wiping their eyes, Kleenexes and everything like that. So I want to have a little bit of fun. I wanted to do, this is something I love to do. I'm going to rapid fire word association before I let you go. Are you up for the challenge?
Absolutely.
All right. First thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right. UCLA.
Right now, basketball.
March Madness. There we go. Justin Timberlake.
Sexy.
Olympics.
Pride.
Best Disney movie.
Oh, Mulan, obviously.
Michigan.
Cold.
Bill Walton.
Oh, larger than life.
Favorite.
One of a kind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Favorite cereal.
Cheerios.
The beach.
Surfing.
Best nonprofit charity for athletes with physical challenges.
Yeah, no question.
Oh, Scout, this was so great. I could talk to you forever, but I've already taken up way too much of your time, so I really thank you for this. I mean this so sincerely, that the world would be a better place with more people like you, with more people that have a heart like yours. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and this was just great for me, and I know for everybody that's listening.
Gosh, thank you so very much. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for having me on. It was a lot of fun, and again, I just really appreciate you spreading the word about CAF and the work that we do.
Anytime. The pleasure is all mine. Scout, thank you very much.
All right, take care.
Oh, Scout. Look, I was not joking when I told Scout that I could just sit here and talk to her for hours. The stories that she has and the outlook that she has on life, it's second to none. So I really appreciate that. And I especially wasn't joking when I said that the world would be a better place if we had more people like Scout Bassett. Just her outlook on life. And like I said at the beginning of this podcast, how she just takes adversity and just does not let it affect her negatively. Doesn't necessarily repress it, and it's a part of her life, but she uses it to her advantage, and she turns all these negatives into positives, and that is just, I really appreciate her time. That's going to do it for this episode of the podcast, episode 41 of the Reindl Report. As always, you can go on iTunes and get this. It's really easy. You just get if you got the iPhone, find the podcast app, search the Reindl Report. You can find it right there. You can subscribe. If you could comment and share it, I would love that, especially the comments. That's how the brand grows. That's just, it's my shameless plug that I make every episode, but that's just how things work. More comments, you move higher up the charts. I don't know how it works, but hey, everything else is also archived on the ReindlReport.com, the ReindlReport.blogspot.com. Either one should get you there, and that's where you can find this podcast, all my past podcasts, interviews, and everything else. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at the Polar Bear. Really want to thank Scout Bassett on Twitter and Instagram at Scout Bassett. And I said it during the podcast, during the interview. Definitely give her a follow. I mean, her Instagram especially has some of the pictures from that trip to China that she took last year, visiting her orphanage that she grew up in. There's a picture of her feeding this little kid who's climbing up on her and has a hand on her prosthetic leg, and it brought me to tears when I saw that she posted that. So if you're on Instagram, Twitter, all that, definitely give Scout a follow. She has a very exciting journey that she's already accomplished, and one that she's still a journey that she's still on. As she said, she's training for the 2020 Paralympics in Tokyo. So 3.5 years away, the training starts now for Scout. So really appreciate that. Thanks for listening in, and I will talk to you guys next time.